I will be talking about data democratization. This is a pretty loaded term. We've seen it in many discussions with our customers, and it's something that everyone talks about. But what I've seen is that people tend to view it slightly differently. So what I'll do is I'll talk about it a little bit more, let's say in a generic way, how we understand data democratization, and then I'll show you how you can use Clover to get there, to help you democratize access to data across your organization. So first, let's see what Google says, right? When you Google, you'll find many definitions of what data democratization is. A short one is that it's basically an ongoing process that helps you make data accessible and available to a wide range of users within the organization. And the main goal of democratization is to provide those users with the ability to analyze the data and extract value from it. For most organizations these days, data is one of the best assets they have. And many organizations collect huge amounts of data, but not everyone can use them effectively and work with it very well. And data democratization is an attempt to improve that, because as you get more people working with data, the idea is that you get better value out of it, because more people will think about how to use it more effectively, how to make their job better and get better results. So when you look at the definition, there are a few things that many different people understand slightly differently, and also many definitions for data democratization or descriptions look at it slightly differently. So I'll go and try to unpack the definition a little bit, and we'll talk about how we understand it and how different parts of the process or of the whole thing can be done. So first, oftentimes I've seen kind of the notion that data democratization is something that happens and then it's done, and suddenly everyone just works more effectively and the data is more useful than it was before. But this is actually not the case. When you think about how real organizations work, you can't do something like this as kind of a big bang migration or some switch. You need to do it as an ongoing process, because people will need to learn how to work with data. And when you have someone who is used to working with their single application and occasionally getting an export in an Excel file, they are not going to be super effective the first day if you give them access to data from 200 other applications. And also organizationally, it's often not that easy to give access to all data to everyone. In some cases, it might not even be possible to regulations, for example, or even kind of many applications might just be useful to only a small part of the organization, and no one else really needs that. So when you think about this, it's not enough to just, for example, give your users login to your data warehouse or data lake and tell them, look, everything that we have gets loaded here, it's refreshed, the data is fresh there, so go use that. It's not going to help them. What you need to do is to help build culture that teaches users to use and explore the data, so that they can find novel and innovative ways of using the data for something, right? Because everyone has their own domain where they work with. For example, marketing team will have their marketing apps and they will be good at using them. But what if they get access to sales data or easier access to sales data? Can they use that in some way to improve their marketing messaging or campaigns? Sure, they can, right? Because they will be able to easier see how it ends, not just when a lead is converted from someone who clicked on the web page to a conversation with a salesperson, but also whether it ended with a large deal, a small one, and so on. So even in such a small, limited slice of the world as marketing and sales, the collaboration can help. But you need to make sure that people who are working within those teams understand that. And that doesn't happen with a fancy presentation saying that we now are an organization that has a data democratization strategy and that's done. So it's a process. It will take a while. For large organizations, it can be quite a while, but it's something that you can start on what I would call a small scale. Right? Just start with a couple apps that you know that are often used, or that the data from those applications is often requested, and start with that. Teach people about those, how to use it, and then expand the scope of what they can see. And this also helps everyone maintaining those applications and taking care of the data to prepare for basically the volume of data they will be working with, the new users and all of that. And oftentimes when you look at what data democratization means, you'll find comparison between let's say traditional organization and the modern one, where the traditional stores data in silos, which is an interesting notion, right? Because oftentimes you'll have different kinds of applications. You will have a CRM system, an ERP. You might have dozens or even hundreds of internal applications that you've developed. And all of these have their purpose, right? They have been either bought or built for a reason. No one just wastes money or time just so that they can say they are using an application. There's always a purpose. And when you decide to give access to everyone, you can do it in a way where basically go into each application or each system where you store your data, create an account for every person within the organization, and do that. But that's not very different from the original situation where people had easy access to the applications they use daily, and it was difficult for them to go outside of that. If you just give them access to everything that you have, you only made the problem worse. Because what happened is that in theory, the access is easy for them because they have an account, but they don't understand it, right? They will have to learn potentially how to use hundreds of applications, learn how their data model works. And that's not very useful. Not everyone can be an expert on everything, especially in larger organizations where you really might have hundreds or even thousands of different applications. So that's not very useful. And one of the ways of handling that is to put something in between your users and the data in those applications. What we do in Clover is that we create a data catalog that does just that. So we no longer give access to everyone to every application, right? But just to data catalog. And data catalog is the layer that helps those users centralize the metadata to understand what's in the data, to see the relationship and see or think about how to use it to explore essentially the data that they have without having to log in into an unfamiliar system and trying to explore a user interface they don't really know. And there's a single place where you get access to everything. And in many cases, this is something that the organizations do, and we have quite an interesting answer in how this can be done so that you can work with your data directly without having to download small samples or search for extracts and so on. And I'll show you what it looks like in a couple minutes. There will be a demo included at the end of this presentation. So build a data catalog that gives your users access to the data that you have. Don't try to give them access to everything. And as you are doing this, many of you might think, well, okay, but we do have a warehouse, or data lake, and all the data is stored there, but it still often doesn't really help with the metadata problem. And you want to have a place where you can search through metadata and so on. And not everyone will be familiar with, for example, SQL if you want to work with warehouse directly, or with data lake where you have data in different formats and so on. Of course, a huge part of the whole democratization process is collaboration. As I mentioned, it's a process, right? So it's not happening overnight. And there are people who own the data initially, right? They need to agree on what to publish, how to publish, and so on. Then there are people who want to have access to the data. And then there's always someone in between, typically the IT, who need to make it happen in some way. And all of these parts of the organization need to work together for this to be effective. And the best way to go about that is to start with something small. And you don't really need to give or to publish all the data at once. There are for sure data sets that are used daily, and some of them are, or other data sets that are used very infrequently, so people don't really need that data outside of a small group of users. So start with the popular ones, learn how to work with that. Your users will get used to having access to data through certain means, for example, through data catalog and working with certain tools. And once they get into the habit of doing that, keep adding more. And it's especially important to allow the collaboration to happen. So if someone comes in and asks for a new data set, either you publish it because you have that already, or you figure out a way of building the data set if it's not something that is directly available. Sometimes you need to apply some sort of transformation or some business process to data to get what users are asking for, and then publish that so that they don't have to redo it again if someone else gets the same idea, so they don't have to do the same preparation that you've done for them before. And with that, you need to make sure that the data that you publish is trusted and high quality. Oftentimes, you'll have different quality of data in different systems, especially if you are working with something where data is entered by hand. You might have a lot of low quality data in it, or if it's an old system and something that was entered into the system 20 years ago is likely not that useful anymore. Right? There are not many use cases where you need to look at, for example, your customer data from 20 years ago, but also it might not have the quality that you are now expecting from the data that was added last year. So make sure that what you publish makes sense and is only high quality, because otherwise you are just making it, again, worse for the users who are working with data. They might not be familiar with the original data model or the whole evolution of how the data got there. So they will not know the specialties that, for example, I don't know, 10 years ago, you didn't have an email field in your database. So you put emails into comment field or something like that, right? So they don't know that. And if you are working with your data and publishing it for everyone to see, make sure that these kind of small specialties of your data sets are somehow ironed out, and don't bother the people who are just trying to use the data and can't spend the time to research the whole history of how it got there. And I often used to call it like data prep hell, because that's exactly what happens. And you get a data set, you are happy that it's there, then you try to process it, and from, I don't know, 15,000 records, 10,000 is fine, and 5,000 is just complete mess, and you spend days and days just cleaning it up. So as an IT, make sure that when you are publishing the data for your users, don't publish raw data if you can, right? Obviously, there might be use cases where raw data is useful, but in most cases, you want to publish data that's been cleaned, that maybe is restricted only to recent data, so that the data volume is not so large and so on, so that the people can use it effectively for what it is, right? And that's the part of the collaboration. When someone asks for a data set, they should not only tell you that I need customer data, but the discussion should also involve a question of what for, what do we want to do with customer data, and that allows you to tailor the data set to that user. And you might have 3 different views of the customers in your data sets, but if you set up your tools right, it's not going to matter, because people will use the data catalog, for example, to find the right view of the data that's useful to them, that contains, for example, the columns or the data that they need. And of course, a large part of the data democratization journey is how those users work with the data. So access to data is fine. And if you manage to solve that and your users can get to the data, it still is not the whole story. They still need a way of working with that. And in many teams, you already have some tools, right? Someone might use Power BI for reporting. Some other people work with databases, so they like some sort of database interface, so they like typing SQL, and there might be more technical, less technical users, and so on. And usually what pays off is to allow people to use what they had so far. So you should have the ability to publish data in different ways, but also standardize on some common tools, because you might have new teams that work with data in very light way, and they will need something, right? And just letting them pick will only create worse problem, because they'll probably find some other tool that no one else is using. So a good way of approaching this would be to standardize on common tools, but also allow others, usually more specialized or more complex tools, to be used for the teams that already have something, right? If you have, for example, data science team, then you can bet that those people will like to use their Python or something like that, right? If you take that away, but give them more data, they will be unhappy, because on one hand, they have more data, but they've lost the tool that they've used. So don't try to force everyone to do the same thing, but have an answer ready for people who say that they don't really have anything, that they haven't done anything besides getting an export in an Excel file and trying to play with that. So that was kind of the process, right? So I've talked a little bit about how different, let's say, the terms or interesting keywords from the data democratization description can be done. And let's now have a look at how CloverDX can help you get there. So first, for those of you who don't know CloverDX, it's a data integration platform. And the way that we've built the platform is that we basically have 4 pillars on which the whole platform stands. One of the core pillars is the automation of your data workloads. So everything you create in Clover, you can automate. That's the core principle that allows you to be more effective within the organization, and that allows you to work with your data much faster. And you don't want to have processes where you have steps that require people. If you can automate it, do that. And everything you create in Clover can be automated in Clover as well. Another core principle that we use when designing our product is that we aim for Clover to become one place for solving your problems. So we have the tools that allow you to solve simple problems in a simple way, but also complex problems, usually in more complex ways, because that's just the nature of the problem that you are trying to solve. So one set of tools that your teams can learn, that they can work with, and if you have multiple teams using Clover, they can communicate using the same language, so you don't have difficulties with having to integrate multiple different technology stacks and so on. So everything on one platform makes it easier for the organization to use it more effectively. And of course, once you automate and once you have one platform where this can happen, you should get better productivity. And your development teams or technical teams should be more productive because the tools will help them do their job faster. For example, test their jobs easier or build jobs that scale much easier and so on. But also, if everything is automated and you only have one platform that you trust, you can trust the data that comes out of that. And if everything is properly tested, you know that the data will be right and it will answer the questions that you are trying to ask. So these 3 core pillars are something that we've built the foundation of CloverDX on. And what we've been doing is we've been adding more and more functionality that helps expand the user base for CloverDX. So one of the large features basically centers around self-service for everyone, so that you can really get towards that data democratization where different kinds of users, whether they are technical from the IT team or from the data engineering team, can use the same set of tools as people who are not technical and who just want to see their data, work with their data without having to learn how to code or any complex tools. And of course, this kind of platform needs to be deployed in one wide range of scenarios. So we've made sure that Clover can be deployed in different ways, whether you are trying to install it in cloud, on-premise, or even hybrid situations. We always have an approach that allows you to deploy CloverDX and work with it. When we look a little bit deeper into the platform, you can kind of see 2 large user groups using CloverDX. On one hand, you have the IT teams or the technical teams who are using, let's say, the mostly green part of the diagram. So we offer tools that help you design your jobs in a simple way, in visual way. You can test, deploy, and debug everything that you create in Clover. Then we offer CloverDX Server that allows you to automate your jobs. So everything that you created in Designer, you can deploy to Server, automate it there, whether it needs to be triggered by some sort of time schedule or a file arriving or something like that. The server also allows you to operate your jobs at scale so that you can deploy it, for example, in cloud, and it will easily handle large volumes of jobs or massive data volumes. You simply need to scale with your data. And of course, since your jobs will work with all kinds of data, you need to have a way of publishing the data in different situations. On one hand, for automated jobs, you typically publish directly to something, whether it's an application that you work with through an API, or maybe some sort of storage, I don't know, your warehouse in Snowflake or a S3 bucket somewhere, or just file sent by email. The data can be sent in pretty much any way to any target. The other large part of publishing the data is what gets you towards the democratization. Right? So far, we've talked about automated processes, but when you are talking about data democratization, it's about publishing data to people. So from the IT team, you need to be able to publish your data in a way that users can work with it directly. And this is why we have data catalog as part of CloverDX. It serves as a kind of a bridge between what the IT team creates, right? Any job that the IT create, they can wrap in something that can be published in the data catalog. And then you have the business users who don't really need to know much about the platform as far as structure of a job goes, what it's composed of, how it works. They just want to use their data. So they go to data catalog, they find their data set, they explore what's available, and then they use tools like Wrangler or data apps for individual data preparation. So the interfaces that kind of go across the whole organization, from the IT team who uses, let's say, fairly complex and technical interfaces to build pipelines in CloverDX, all the way to business users who use self-service part of the platform to work with the data directly and effectively without having to code. So let's have a look at what it looks like. So let me switch here. All right, I'll just have to log in. So what we are looking at is CloverDX Wrangler. This is the business user interface, let's say. And as I mentioned, one of the ways of getting towards data democratization is to use data catalog to expose your data to users. And this is exactly what's part of CloverDX Wrangler. Right? This is what the data catalog looks like. And you can see that I have a number of data sets published in here with names, descriptions, and so on. And one of the ways that the IT can make the data democratization happen is by publishing different data sets in here. Anything that you can access in CloverDX as a platform, so whether it's an API, database, file, anything really, can be turned into an entry in here in data catalog. You can not only publish raw data as it is, so for example, publish a database table as it is stored in the database, but rather you can also attach business logic to your data. So you can compose more complex entries, right? When I look at that, for example, there's something called employees by revenue. This is not a table in the original database. This is something that's created from tables in the accounting system and from the table in CRM, so that you can see which employees generate what kind of revenue, right? This is mostly for like sales teams, so that you can see which sales rep is the best, and they might get a trophy at the end of the month. So this kind of thing is possible because the data catalog in CloverDX is what we call a live data catalog. You can attach business logic to every connection in here, and it can connect to anything that CloverDX platform can work with. And of course, it allows you to search for everything. So it allows you to explore the data sets. If you just come in here, let's say as a new hire, and you have no idea what's in there, you just are looking for, I don't know, maybe some data around deals because you are in the sales team. So this is what you find, right? You just type in, and it gives you the answer of what you are looking for, right? And then you can explore the data sets in more detail. For example, let's have a look at one of those. Of course, when you work with your data, not only you can see the descriptions and names, but as I mentioned, this is a live data catalog, so it connects with your data sources directly. And when you go and want to work with something, it will show you what it is. So this is not a sample that someone from the IT team uploaded to a data catalog database or anything like that. This is actually live connection to the source system. This one is powered by a database, so this goes to a database, but there are many others that can do something else. For example, I have a HubSpot connector in there that goes to HubSpot CRM through an API and so on. And as you are building the connector, you can attach business logic that does something with your data. And as I mentioned, you usually need to make sure that your data is clean and prepared so that your users who want to use it don't have to do it again, right? That's the whole collaboration part. You publish something and someone comes up and says, well, this column is not correct. There's a problem with dates or something. Can we fix it? And you just add that fix into there. So everyone who uses the data set can work with that afterwards. And of course, you can explore what's in the data, see the descriptions and all of that. And since this is a live connection, I mentioned that you should standardize on some common set of tools so that your users, even if they don't have an answer of how to work with data, that you have something for them. And for CloverDX platform, this is CloverDX Wrangler. When you find a data set in your catalog, you can use it directly. I can do something like that. I'll ignore the settings dialog. And from now on, I will be working directly with my data, and I will be able to transform it in any way I want, right? So this essentially allows me to extract the data in the format I need, right? Because the data set that the IT published for me might not be exactly what I need. Maybe, for example, I don't need the contact ID column, so I can drop that, right? I only care about the names and addresses and so on. So I can work with my data, add some transformations, and it will essentially record the steps that I take with my data and allow me to replay that later at any time. So I can run my job, and it will now go to the data source, grab the latest version, the live data from that data source, apply the transformation that I've created, and give me the result, right? Like in here, for example, I configured it to produce a CSV file, which I can download, and I can work with it later, right? Because it's rarely that this is the end game, right? I typically don't need to just look at the data, but I want to use it in some way. And oftentimes that usage means loading into some sort of reporting tool, or maybe sending it to a customer directly and so on. So I need to have a way of exporting the data out of my tools to be able to use it elsewhere. That again comes back to what I said earlier about giving users something to work with, but also allowing them to bring their own tools, right? And if there is someone who loves using Excel for whatever reason, because for example, they like colorful tables or they already have something written in Excel that they need to use, just allow them to dump your data in Excel and work with that.